wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
You're listening to A Quirky Journey, the healthy family podcast with your hosts Jo Whitten and Fouad Kassab.
Welcome to A Quirky Journey. This is your host Fouad Kassab, and with me is my best friend and co-host Jo Whitten. Jojo, good morning.
Good morning, Fufu.
I'm trying to talk like a radio person.
I know, I heard that. I'll have to practice.
Yeah.
You're so much better at it than me. It's that voice. You've got the radio voice.
All right, so today's podcast, Jo.
Yes. Okay.
You're one of your favorite people, and you've been raving about her for a long time.
Okay,
and you're like, I want to talk to her. Okay, you have a little crush on her, I think.
No.
A bit of a crush.
No, we have a really lovely guest for you guys today. So probably a lot of you who are on the grain-free or healing sort of diets journey will probably know her sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. Her website, Empowered
You're
Sustenance.
already starstruck. You even can't say her name.
It's Empowered Sustenance is her main site that's been around for about 5 years, her blog. And she has beautiful recipes and she writes really beautifully, doesn't she, Fouad?
Yeah.
She talks
so simple and just straight to the point, but also like in an educational, informative way. It's doesn't oversimplify things and respects people's intelligence, but at the same time just gives really simple advice to make change. Yeah. So it's wonderful. Yeah.
Inspiring, and she's been through a lot in her health journey, and she's going to tell her story today. She's a nutritional therapy practitioner and an author. And she has another business as well where she helps people with essential oils and flower essences to help with their brain function. So that's really interesting. And she's been through the GAPS diet and tried different things. And she talks about listening to your body and to working out what is best for you. But also, I won't give it all away, but you need to listen because you'll find a lot of help, not just for your diet side of things and healing, but also just changing your mindset towards healing. She's a nutritional therapy practitioner. She's an author and the creator of Empowered Sustenance, an amazing website, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. Hi, Lauren.
Hey, Jo. Hey, Fouad. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
We're so happy to have you.
It's our pleasure. Jo has been so excited. She's like been eking and going, yay, all week long. So she's super excited to talk to you. And I'm like, fantastic. She's in such a good mood to talk to you. So thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, are you trying to say that sometimes I'm not in a good mood?
Yes.
Oh,
quite often, Jo. Well, you work with me, so it's kind of hard to stay in a happy mood all the time. But
hey.
I have gotten nothing but wonderful, warm vibes from both of you. You just seem sunshine.
Thank you. And so you're in Seattle, is that right, Lauren?
That's right.
And it's July the 4th today. Woo! So it's a holiday?
Yeah. Gorgeous day outside, and I have fun plans this evening.
Oh, that's lovely. What's the temperature like? It's summer, isn't it?
Yes, finally. I mean, we've had a 40-year-long winter here.
Oh.
Wow.
It's led me to doubt if this is where I want to keep my roots. But finally the sun is here. We're all getting vitamin D. Literally, Seattle spirits lift when the sun comes out.
Oh, I know. Makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Totally.
Well, if you're considering a change, Australia is always sunny here, especially where Jo lives. It's always sunshine. So, you're always welcome to come and visit us down under.
You're definitely welcome.
So I've heard. Sounds tempting.
It's sunny today, but it hasn't been for a couple of weeks, I have to be honest. Oh, that's good. All right. Well, thank you so much for filling us in.
Just it would be great, I think, if you share how you came across Lauren's blog, and then we'll get into the interview from there.
I will. Recipes. But the funny thing is, I was thinking about it when we started talking to you about doing a podcast. was looking through your blog in a lot more detail. Like, you know how it is, you search for something online and you say, I want a recipe for grain-free something. And of course, your blog pops up. And, I can't even remember what the first thing was that I made of yours. It was probably something sweet, because it generally is. And back years ago, especially. I'm trying to think what it was. Did you have it? No, I'll have to go back and have a look at my old Facebook posts, because I'm sure I shared it on there. But it was probably 5 years ago that I first saw your blog. How long has your blog been going?
That was the beginning.
Okay.
5 years ago, basically.
Okay. Yeah, 4 or 5 years ago I probably first saw it. And was it, did you have a GAPS focus right from the start, or no?
I did. It was actually specific carbohydrate diet.
That's right.
That was my introduction. Mm-hmm. And from there, I found the GAPS book.
That's right. Because I think, as often happens, it takes a lot of exposure to an idea before you really click with it. And I had just heard little bits about the SCD diet and GAPS here and there, but it never sunk in. It was kind of like something, that other people needed that I didn't. And I never noticed that your blog was GAPS focused until I started looking at it, just recently. And I went, oh, how come I never noticed that before? But I guess it's because until I needed it, I didn't really look for that. And right. and then suddenly it just, when I don't know if you know our story at all, my son had severe OCD, anxiety, depression at age of 13. It all sort of hit, and something inside my head kept saying, look into GAPS. And I kind of didn't really even know what GAPS was, but I must have had those little bits of exposure to have it coming up into my mind. And so thank you for that, because it was probably partly your blog that helped me think of it.
I was stunned by your story and your son's profound recovery. That was beautiful and inspiring to read. And now to hear that he's taken his healing journey at this young age to already be speaking and sharing his experience is just incredible. And you sound like a very powerful mama and very powerfully connected to your intuition to be able to follow those voices in your head that were pointing you to the right direction.
Yep. And I think that's so important. Is I always have to have a laugh and say, you got to listen to your gut, especially once you start healing it.
I love that.
So you say on your website that your mission is to share the simple steps that freed you of chronic pain and medications. And we'd love to hear your story. So
I'd love to share it. It started about 5 years ago. It was, just before I started blogging, really. So I had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis. And if any of your listeners are familiar with gut healing or Crohn's disease, this is in a similar vein of autoimmunity. And I was 14. I was in high school and hospitalized for 2 weeks when my first flare hit. Wow. It was extremely, extremely severe. To the point where I was doubled over in pain, rushing to the bathroom 30 times a day. Wow. Internal bleeding. And so the next 4 years of high school was interspersed with these severe flares coming up, even though I was taking medication that was supposed to, quote, treat the problem. And it was very psychologically and physically challenging not knowing when my body was going to flare again, and the medications just stopped working.
And to be in high school at that time, how difficult would that have been at school, these things happening?
Right. I was actually homeschooled. I read that you homeschooled.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Cool.
So there was an upside to that, because I don't think I probably would have needed to be homeschooled if I was originally in a classroom. So that made it easier, but I did feel very separated from my peers. It was another level of feeling very different and separated, now having this health problem that I felt like nobody could relate to. So by the time I got to college, I really felt like that was my way out. Like, finally, my heart was saying, finally, you're going to not be different anymore. Like, you're going to go to college, you're going to be able to connect with people, and you're going to be able to look like a normal person. Like, I had so much at stake to hide my disease, to present a false smile, and because I thought if I could fake it, that would be the reality. But the reality was, my body really, it had something better in mind, and my body really needed me to listen to it. And my body basically was telling me, you're not well enough to be at school right now. So medications had all stopped working, and the doctors at that point told me I was going to have a portion of my large intestine removed. Wow. So yeah, that would mean a colostomy bag. And this was an important piece of the story for me. Like, through all the pain, through all the struggle, it didn't hit until that moment, because I was a dancer, and I was a dancer because through dancing, I could contact my soul in a way that I never had before. I could feel alive in a way that I had no other experience in life of being so at home with myself. So something deep in me in that moment said, if you get this colostomy bag and the surgery, you're not going to be able to dance in the same way you used to. So with that realization, I went home, and it was so strange. In the back of our family's bookshelf, there was the specific carbohydrate diet book. It's called Breaking the Vicious Cycle. And my mom had purchased this book probably when I was first diagnosed, but we didn't look at it because our doctors told me that food wasn't going to help. Yeah, of course, many people have been there, and it breaks its heart. And it's just like that little voice that told you, GAPS diet, that little voice in me, like, just my eyes laser focused to that book, and I pulled it out and I said, I'm going to do this. And, at this point I'm living with my parents. I'm 18, 19. And they say, if you think it's going to help, they're completely supportive, even though they don't have faith this is going to help me. But they do want to see me follow a path where I have some hope. So I felt very supportive, and literally within 3 days, my acute symptoms of bleeding and debilitating pain disappeared.
Wow. So up to that time, how had you been eating? Sorry, Fouad.
So, from age, after my mom finished breastfeeding me, I was put on a standard, quote, like, healthy organic diet, which included fruit juice and whole grains and, low fat margarine, butter substitute, all those healthy things, and my mom was absolutely trying her best. Yeah. With the information that was provided to her.
Well, exactly. That's what we were told.
Right. So I know that accumulated. If we're talking about the dietary causes that could have contributed to my disease, we have that. We have me being a very, as are so many people prone to chronic disease, a very hypersensitive child, hypersensitive to energy, very empathic, just very permeable boundaries, you could say, and feeling things really deeply. And then when I was 11, I became anorexic as a very unhealthy coping mechanism to deal with emotions and anger and fear that was just too big for my little body. So that heavily contributed, I believe.
Yeah.
The emotional trauma around that time, and then what I was consuming at that time, Diet Pepsi and Special K soy-based cereal, absolutely really set the stage for autoimmunity.
Yeah.
So you said within 3 days, your acute symptoms disappeared, and I'm wondering, what did you do? What was the big change? How did your diet shift in those 3 days, and what do you think made the biggest difference?
Well, the biggest difference was I stopped eating. I'm sure it was stopping the grains because I had switched to gluten-free, maybe 2 years after I was first diagnosed. My mom had taken me to a couple naturopaths, and they advocated gluten-free. So I said, okay. And I gave it a try. It was never enough. But I was kind of loading my body and my poor battered down microvilli in my intestines with carbohydrates from rice, buckwheat, those healthier gluten-free grains that my body still couldn't digest. So even taking those out and incorporating, I made a homemade chicken broth those first few days and drank copious amounts of that. I did gummies with apple juice and gelatin. And this was on a specific carbohydrate diet. I didn't have the information of fermented food and healthy fats that I would later get from GAT's diet. So even without those nutrients added in, I could still reap some healing.
That's awesome.
So you were at college at that time while you were going through this?
Yeah, I was a freshman in college, but then I had to leave and return back home. So I was at home while I was doing all my gut healing, and eventually I started taking up college classes online to fill in my education.
So what were you studying before you had to leave?
I was studying dance.
Okay, right.
A dance minor, and I was also, ironically, a business major. Now I have. It's really funny. I never completed my degree, but now I'm running 2 very successful businesses without that business admin degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've been
That's
there
usually
too.
the case. Yeah, absolutely. So that was your introduction to like a more whole food style of eating with the specific carbohydrate diet. And yeah, we know as well from ourselves is whatever it is the diet that we went on. Like I personally went on paleo, and it was a low carb paleo. I lost a lot of weight, and probably like 30 kilos or 28 kilos or something. And my allergies improved, my eczema and acne went away. And in the beginning, I was sort of, so convinced that it was the carbohydrate thing that really helped me. But then, it's been 6 years now for me, and looking more at it from a distance, knowing that it actually was a return to whole foods that actually helped me, and, tweaking things here or there. We in the beginning, I was quite convinced that everyone should go on a low-carb diet, and then I started talking about it. But then, things started changing. And I'm wondering, for you, how did your journey go along? Like, did you have some certain convictions in the beginning, and how did your mind change over the years, and how your perspective changed? And did you experience a lot of fluctuation in your journey, or were you like straight onto it from the onset, and you knew what you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was definitely on a winding path, and it continues. So from the specific carbohydrate diet, like I said, I found the GAPS diet. That was because shortly after starting SCD, I started my blog. I really wanted to share the recipes I was making. And also something in me was just calling for me to make something of this healing experience. Like, that was the self-empowerment, was sharing what I was learning. So that was part of the healing. And and getting into the online sphere, back then, 5 years ago, it was a very small community of bloggers.
Tell me about it.
Fouad started blogging
my
10
in
years
2006.
ago. Yeah.
So,
you guys are old hands. Yeah.
I'm kind of over the medium now, like it's that old, like, oh God, I don't want to blog anymore. But I'm much more enjoy the podcasting and, talking to people on Facebook and face to face as well. But yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah. Well, I love that now blogging is branching into different mediums where it feels more personal, like podcasts and videos. So I agree. So then I found gaps. And then I began tailoring my recipes to paleo and calling them paleo, because this was a diet that was much more seemingly approachable to people who didn't want to do the very detailed steps of GAPS and just wanted to eat a, quote, healthier diet. So you see paleo in a lot of my recipe titles. Yeah. At one point, I experimented with the Autoimmune Paleo protocol, where this was the point in GAPS where I wanted to introduce more starches and see if eliminating the nightshades, the seed-based spices, and things like that would improve some of my ongoing symptoms. At this point, a few years into it, I still had significant healing to do. While I was not bleeding and didn't have active signs of disease, I was still struggling with some significant hormonal problems, and I was struggling with bloating and just not digesting my food fully. So I was always looking for what was next. I definitely had a few twists in the path where I'd go way too low carb because I was trying to kill off all the bugs in my system by not eating any sugar without understanding the full picture there. Mm-hmm. That made me feel not so hot. And then I swung the pendulum way too far. And I have a blog post that I shared my experience kind of finding the right carb balance. So then there was this whole movement, like this fad about eating all the healthy carbohydrates to heal your thyroid. And that was just, as you can imagine, wonderful for my blood sugar. It didn't kind of swung the pendulum way too far. Right, so then I settled into through using a glucometer, through using muscle testing, through using clinical evaluation, I found what was a right grain-free carbohydrate balance for my body. And interestingly, most recently, I've actually started the ketogenic diet.
Fascinating.
And I've talked about this on Instagram. I haven't publicized it broadly because I really wanted to give it a try personally before I recommended it or discussed it in depth. Yeah. But the main motivation was healing some, ongoing issues that hadn't been addressed in my body. And also, it's such a powerful therapeutic diet, and I was hearing miracle stories about it. So I wanted to know if this was something I could really recommend to people. And this is definitely going to sidetrack the conversation. And
no, that's fine. We like sidetracks.
Well, it's really interesting to me as well to hear. But how long have you been doing it for now, the ketogenic diet?
About 2.5 months.
Okay, fantastic. And just to give the listeners a bit of background, what does it mean? What's a ketogenic diet? What does that look like? And what's its impact on the body?
So a ketogenic diet switches your body from running on glucose, which is sugar that we obtain from our food. When we talk about blood sugar, we're talking about glucose that is made available in the bloodstream when we consume carbohydrates. Also, glucose is synthesized when we eat a lot of protein as well. And in a ketogenic state, your body is fat burning. So it means you're obtaining energy from the fat you take in and also the fat stored on your body. When dietary fats break down, some of them turn into ketones. And ketones are the form of fat that can fuel your brain. And then you also have fatty acids that can fuel your body. So what we know is human beings, millennia ago, were ketogenic at different points in their life because they didn't have the accessibility to food, and especially carbohydrate-laden food, that we have right now all the time. And so when people would have to go long periods of time without food, their body would naturally switch to burning ketones. It's a much smoother fuel because your body always has a source of fat available from the fat stored on your body. And so whereas when you're a sugar burner, when you're eating carbohydrate, you get those sugar spikes as food comes into your system. And so this can just cause in your nervous system and your body kind of an unsettled, like, jitteriness. I'm speaking from what the felt experience is for me. Because when I switched to keto, I really felt that smooth clarity in my body, in my moods too. When I get hungry, it's not a need for food. It's just a hunger. And I want to clarify that keto is a therapeutic diet. I don't plan to do this for my whole life. I plan to. I cycle in and out of it because I think that's really healthy. But I would love to provide more details in an upcoming post about this experience and some troubleshooting because it was a challenging transition. I kind of felt miserable for a couple weeks, but the biggest result was what seems most significant to my life was actually coming more in touch with the wisdom of my body. Like, the way my intuition amplified and clarified was so unexpected, but so profound, and also becoming feeling my emotions deeper. And I'm talking to now other women, especially who are doing keto and they're having a similar experience. And so that's very significant to me, especially that my mission is to help people get more in touch with the intelligence that is always present within them so they can navigate their life better.
I back in 2011, that was the diet I went on. It was a ketogenic paleo diet. And I went through what you spoke about. It was a bit hard, emotionally difficult in the beginning. It only took me, though, around 10 days. And what happens in our body is that the body upregulates its ability to utilize its fat. We have these chronic elevations of insulin in our body, and it stops us from being able to tap into our own fat. And we're dependent on glucose, which is why we eat 3 meals a day or 6 meals a day or whatever it is. But then when your body knows how to burn fat, it switches completely and it starts re-regulating your metabolism and also your attitudes towards food. So it starts clarifying to you how much food you actually need, not just eating just to get the carbohydrates, because your body can be overloaded with too much food, of course, just so that it can get the carbs. So I found it really, really therapeutic for me, and the biggest weight loss was on a ketogenic diet, and the biggest improvement was on it. And what I've been doing recently, and again, this is not something I've started talking about, this is probably the first time I talk about it in public, but I've been thinking a lot about how much it is that we spend thinking about food and eating, and like how much food do we actually need, and how much of it is an addiction to food. So looking at looking at our ancestors who used to have to hunt and gather their food, which is quite an energy intensive thing to do. I just can't see them eating as much as we do, like 3 meals a day with snacks. This just sounds right to me. So over the past 10 or has it been 2 weeks? I'm not really sure. I've been eating 1 meal a day. Yeah. And I've been getting into a ketogenic state during the day, and then at night I'm just eating, imagining myself like just having come back from the hunt and eating with my family. And throughout the day, the ketogenic state is just absolutely wonderful. Like I feel hunger, but it's not an emotional hunger. It's not one that says to me, oh my God, you've got to eat right now, and none of that. It's sort of a steady ability to feel hunger and perceive your body from a bit of a distance, not be tangled up in the obsession of eating, which could happen when you're trying to reach for carbohydrates all the time, because your body just doesn't know otherwise how to break the cycle of sugar. And it's just, I think there's room for it. And as you said, it's probably not something I would do long term, but just the freedom that comes from being able to burn your own fat on your body is just liberating in many, many ways. So yeah, what a great thing for you to be doing, and looking forward to reading your blog post and seeing what comes out of it.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing experience, because that resonates with me so much. And when you said the word liberating, that's exactly what I felt. And absolutely, I've been coming to the realization as well that now that I don't need to eat as often, it looks like the food addiction in our culture is even more and more apparent to me.
That's right. Yeah. Isn't that so? Like, that's what blew my mind. It's like, I'm just looking at myself going, why was I eating 5 times a day before this? Like, I could just easily make do with one. I'm much more productive. My mental space is just calmer and more focused. I feel good. Like, I can actually afford better quality food. Like, I can buy organic everything now because I'm eating, just the best food once a day. And it's just, and also, food tastes so much better. Like, it just tastes so much better. Like when you're a little bit hungry, and you really value it and you're thankful for it, and you're like, oh, thank you. Like, I don't want to waste anything of this. It's just such a different experience. A quick aside, something that caught my attention is when you said the seed-based spices, and it had never occurred to me actually that seed spices is problematic, but it kind of makes sense. Can you just talk a little bit about that for me?
Yeah. So on the autoimmune paleo protocol, it seems to go a little bit farther than GAPS. So starches are allowed from grain-free sources such as plantains, so it has more freedom there. But nuts and seeds and nightshades and eggs are also excluded from the first stages of that diet. So I found that actually challenging, and it was more of a self-experiment. I never noticed I was symptomatic from eating seeds. I knew I had been pretty sensitive to almonds, so I avoided that. But besides almonds, I was great with nuts and seeds, and I took it out just so I could see what autoimmune paleo was all about. But caraway seeds, poppy seeds, pepper, a lot of the spices that we frequently use are seed-based, and so very sensitive individuals, when they're doing the autoimmune paleo protocol, can experience flare-ups from including those ingredients.
And in early GAPS, you do take out all the spices, except for pepper. I suppose the white pepper is left in.
Oh, good point. I never did the introduction to GAPS.
Oh, okay.
So thank you for there. I jumped in from the later stages of SCD.
Okay, yep. Yeah, so because I have noticed in GAPS a lot of people can't handle any spices, not even, cinnamon or anything at first. So it's until they've healed their gut a bit. But yeah, that's interesting. And also, I'd just like to ask you, from a woman's standpoint with the hormone side of things, I've had a bit of feedback from GAPS practitioners and also people that I've talked to who've done ketogenic diets, and they've said that a lot of women can't cope with the really low carb sort of diet for any long period of time, especially ketogenic, because it starts to mess with their hormones. Do you know anything about that?
I would be surprised or interested to hear other factors and more specific case studies, because keto has been very helpful to my hormones.
That's good.
So, and I do know there's some contraindications when one would have really low thyroid numbers.
Yes, it was to do with thyroid. I can't remember the exact details.
Right. If I would say definitely check with your, I don't want to sound,
right.
Your healthcare provider if you have Hashimoto's or really low thyroid numbers and you're a woman before you start a diet like this. I had some struggle with my thyroid, and I'm thriving on keto right now. My periods, which had, greatly improved. They were disastrous years ago. They had greatly improved, but I still had some progress to make on them in terms of cramps and mood stability. And keto has been very supportive for that as well.
That's interesting. And I think you mentioned earlier about there was something about thyroid. You said earlier. Are you low? Like you were struggling with the hyperactive thyroid? Was it?
Look, I tend towards low thyroid function.
Yeah. I don't know a lot about thyroid issues. I just get people saying, different things about the different diets and what helps with thyroid. I think earlier you said something about you tried carbohydrates. So that's funny that's a completely opposite approach, really.
Yeah. Again, bioindividuality.
Yeah.
When the metabolism is supported in a way that it's supported through keto, hormones can fall in place. Mm-hmm. Thyroid is all about metabolism function.
Right. Okay.
So keto gives you energy on a very stable level.
So Lauren, just to switch gears a bit, you were talking about listening to our bodies and mindset towards what our journey is about, and we find that to be a great factor that actually differentiates the person who sticks to something or doesn't, for one thing. And just wondering if you can shine some light for us on your experience and the experience of your community. What does that mean? When they say listen to your body and they say you have to have a certain mindset, what does that look like to you for someone to succeed or to stick to a healing journey?
That's a great question, and this is a topic close to my heart. So really, I wanted to start talking about deeper healing and the mindset shifts around healing when I first learned about the concept of neuroplasticity. This is the science of brain health that considers how our brains heal by creating new pathways. And the only way we create new brain pathways is through doing different actions or thinking different thoughts. Now, there are two segues that I would just love to go down in this discussion.
Let's do it. Let's go down.
So one of them is about brain health and how critical it is to understand that our brains can heal, and healing our brain has all this implication in healing our body. So you introduced Empowered Sustenance, the other company that I have, which I launched with my business partner, John Jennis, who's a well-known clinician and nutrition instructor in Seattle, is a company called Mio Energetics. And we share forms of energy medicine in the form of flower essences and essential oils that help balance the brain so that the body can heal and so that we can more easily implement new thought patterns, new ways of holding ideas about ourselves that is going to support our healing. So really, I believe in order to heal the brain, we kind of have to have some visualization of how the brain heals. And it's by creating neural connections, which are brain pathways. So, communication pathways between our brain cells. And every time we think a thought, and then we repeat that thought, it creates a neural connection. Okay, the same thing when we do a behavior or our body works a certain way. So, for example, every time we experience anxiety or a panic attack, it's strengthening the neural connection for that panic attack and making it more likely to occur in the future. And the same actually occurs for inflammation. Every time we have inflammation in our body, it's actually making it more likely to occur in the future. Same for poor digestion, same for being stressed out. Now, the flip side is every time we incorporate a positive action or a positive thought, and we intentionally repeat that, we're actually building new neural connections that then our brain in the future can favor over those brain pathways that don't serve us. So this was like completely mind-blowing for me because I struggled with very severe anxiety. And I know so many of us who are hypersensitive, hyper-aware, high anxiety comes along with that. Yeah. And I thought I was just cursed. Then I learned that, the way my brain works is actually something I can consciously choose to change. So that instead of my brain kind of being the master of me, I get to be the master of my brain. And this is literally the most empowering thing I have heard in my healing journey in 5 years, and why I'm so enthusiastic to share it, because this is a life-changing piece. To know you can change the patterns you feel trapped into. It unlocks your ability to make new habits in your life around what you're eating, how you're living, and the stories you're telling yourself about your body and healing. And absolutely, we know that mindset shapes our reality. So we have to change our mind in order to change our reality.
Yeah.
So when we talk about mindset and healing, I like to share the archetype of the healing journey, because this is really supportive in people perceiving themselves as a hero rather than a victim to their illness. So for a long time in my life, I had all this neuroplasticity running in my brain that I'm cursed with anxiety. I'm cursed with this autoimmune disease. Why me? It's not fair. There's nothing I can do to change it. And those neural pathways just got stronger. And it's a completely disempowering track to have running in our head. So empowerment starts when we realize we can change that track by consciously and repeatedly thinking something different. And what I like to think about is this archetype of the healing journey. We get this from the work of Joseph Campbell, who was a mythologist. He wrote The Hero of 1,000 Faces.
Oh, Fouad, I'm going to love you now.
Joseph Campbell, who cannot adore. He's one of the most, I think, profound individuals in the last century to share wisdom. So he shares the archetypal mythological pattern of the hero's journey, which is found in stories in every ancient culture. And these stories were told because they provide a map to young people in the tribe. It's a map of saying, here's an outline of what your life is going to look like and how you are going to find yourself, like how you are going to find your strength and discover who you are. And so I want to do the same for the healing journey, like give people an outline of what it's going to look like. I can't tell you what challenges exactly you're going to meet, but I can tell you here's what to expect. And at the end of it, it's going to be worth it, because you are going to find like the unique gifts of your soul. You're going to find an empowerment that you never experienced before. So do we have time to go through the 8 points in this healing journey archetype?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got heaps of time, as long as you do. So that's
okay. Absolutely. Yeah. So we start out with step 1, which is our ordinary life. Now, this is the place I was in kind of before I started having any health symptoms, even before ulcerative colitis. It's the place where we're told this is what life is, but somehow deep in our soul, we're thinking there should be something more. Like, why am I longing for something that I can't articulate, I can't quite touch, but I feel like something's bigger out there? So that is step one, the ordinary life. Okay, the second part in the healing journey is the call to the journey. Now, this is the symptoms that first speak to us. Mindset shift here, I want to pull this out. Symptoms are the voice of our body. They are sacred messages from our body, but our culture doesn't consider that. Our culture just says symptoms are something to suppress and ignore.
So true.
Yes. So the call to the journey is actually our body talking to us through these symptoms, saying something should change so that you can get to who you need to be. However, part 3 of the healing journey is refusal of the call. So this is where we obey the culture, obey the doctors, and we take Tylenol, we take painkillers, we take over-the-counter stuff, to just mask the symptoms that first start to show up. So for me, I was starting to have really bad heartburn and digestive problems. I was also diagnosed as depressed, and a doctor gave me antidepressants. This is the story with so many people. We medicate what our body is trying to tell us. Yeah. It's not a great solution in the long run. So that's
sorry, I was just going to say it's where we start to treat the symptoms instead of the root cause.
Exactly.
It's suppressing the symptoms.
Yeah,
we're not treating anything.
That's true.
And emotionally, it's when we have like a feeling of fear or pain come up, what we want to do is look the other way. That's usually what we always want to do. And then when it comes up, and that's emotional pain. But when physical pain or discomfort comes up, then we want to look the other way physically as well. And the doctors are just so good at that. They just easily facilitate that ability to overlook what's really going on in our body. That's the success of it. It's the medical industry success is the ability to numb us to our own selves, really. But yeah, sorry, Lauren,
right.
Keep going. Yeah.
No, I'm so glad you said that, because fear is really what feeds the refusal of the call. You're so right in that people actually fear to listen to their body because they fear changing their life. There's a deep fear about finding your true strength, and because guess what? In order to do that, you are going to have to go through some really hard.
Yeah. What does that mean to me? Yeah. What does that mean for my life if I'm going to go down that path? Everything's going to have to change, and that's what scares people. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like you said in your story, Lauren, you just wanted to keep everything normal.
Exactly. Yes, I tried very hard to refuse that call, but it kind of burst down my door.
Yeah,
which
same.
It happens to everybody who has chronic disease. It's like we are like duct taping that door shut, and then one street just comes and punches it through. So that's number 3. Number 4 is crossing the threshold. So that is finally where we get to the point where, like, okay, the door's broken down. There's nothing I can do to keep this beast away from me. And something in us shifts, and we become somewhat reconciled with this realization that I am going to have to change how I am living. And sometimes this is a big milestone decision, and you can pinpoint it the day on the calendar you decided that you were going to change your diet. Or it could be really a series of small little soul whispers in your life, leading up to a decision to make a change or to think differently. So that's crossing the threshold, and suddenly you are on the path of your healing journey. You've just been thinking about it until now, but now you have put your foot on it, and there's no going back. So number 5 is support and temptations. This is what how we face challenges and also strangely how we are provided everything we need at the right time to face those challenges. Because what every wise tradition will tell you is you are always strong enough for what your life presents. So this is the support and temptations. Some temptations I like to pull out here are a lot of the negative self-talk. So falling into that neuroplasticity that I talked about, where we have those old brain pathways where we say, I'm a victim. I'm not strong enough to make these changes. I shouldn't have to make these changes. I can't do this alone. I'm not strong enough. Or I'm not making progress, so this isn't really worth it. It's really tempting to fall back into old ways of thinking because those neural patterns are there. And so what we need to do is pull ourselves out of that thought pattern, create new neuroplasticity so we can have a different reality. The support, of course, can be finding books like Specific Carbohydrate Diet, GAPS Diet, courses and cookbooks like the ones you both have made. And those fall into people's hands when they need them.
Yeah.
Number 6 is facing the greatest fear. I think that steps 5 and 6 aren't really in order. They cycle in and out. So facing the greatest fear in the archetypal stories is when the hero has to face that which he or she thought was going to kill him or her. If we look at my healing journey, that was when I had to leave college because I truly thought my life was over and now I have no hope of ever being like everyone else. Like never, I thought somehow college was the pathway for me to somehow get on the track of my life that I had always envisioned. And it's only through facing the greatest fear that we really realize that the plans we had for our life were not for our best interest, and our body had a better interest at heart for us.
Thank goodness you were different.
Oh, thank goodness. But that's the realization of every single person on the healing journey.
That's right.
Is we're all of us are ugly ducklings. Like we're that duck. We're the swan in the story who's felt ugly our whole life, and we just didn't fit in everywhere. And maybe we can try to fake it really well. But at the end of the healing journey, the realization is, I am the swan. Everybody realizes they're the swan.
That's good.
So after facing the greatest fear, now we have step 7, which is the resurrection. This happens in every myth of a hero. And what it represents is finding the unique gift of ourself. It's finding the voice of our soul and realizing, this has something really important to offer me and to offer the world. And I'll go back to my healing journey to give an example as well. And it's a similar case to both of you is when I went through my healing journey to this point, I realized that I wanted to share recipes, I wanted to share my creativity, and I wanted to share my writing. And when I put all those things into the world, it was healing for both me and it was healing for the people who found those forms of support. And that's step number 8. That's returning home. And it's when we take that beautiful, new, glowing diamond of our soul that we found and we show it to the place from which we came. Now, the challenge here is a lot of times when we go through the healing journey and we return back home doesn't fit so well. Because we've kind of outgrown it. And so there's an interesting cycle that starts over again. Once we get back home, we want to share our gifts. We realize there's a lot of things that I have to change in my environment. Maybe have to change my career. Maybe I have to change my relationships. Maybe I have to change all this stuff. But because of the strength that we found on our healing journey, we are able to make those changes.
What's really interesting to me with Joseph Campbell's work and the beautiful parallels that you drew for us here on the healing journey, and these are cycles that the human being goes through on every growth journey that they go through. So this is cyclical in small cycles, large cycles. This is something that could take one day and you can go through it, and it could take years that you can go through it, and repeatedly happens. But what's beautiful about this whole story and the journey of the hero is to take a step back and see that this is a pattern that goes on in the human being's life, and that one thing that you can do is to just let go into it, not to sort of carry your own burden while this is going on. Because if this is something that is common to all of us, then there's something greater than us that's facilitating this movement in our lives, and that we just have to trust it. And the way that he puts it, he tells people to do what scares them or to follow their bliss. And this is one of the biggest and most useful bits of advice that he gave for people going through these types of experiences, in allowing us to enjoy the journey of what's going on, rather than not just to fear it. Like, we're going to go through and face our biggest fears, and we're going to overcome them. But during that entire time, we don't need to be living in this kind of state that says, oh my God, I have to know exactly what I need to do, otherwise it's not going to work out right, and I just might get stuck in this part of the cycle or whatever it is. And just allowing yourself to be with what is in yourself, and to experience the joy of that journey and allow it to happen and to take place. And all you have to do is really show up for it and just be there and not fight it, and for things will take place. So it's really pleasurable for people to do this. And if you go through it and you go, oh my God, I've got to address all these 8 points in one, I have to do this, I have to do that, then it can turn into a burden. But just allowing yourself to do it, or allowing it to happen, is the way that it should be. Do you agree with that, Lauren?
Yeah, that was so eloquent. I agree with everything you just said, and especially the point on surrender, because something else is facilitating this progress. And really, the progress happens to the degree that we surrender to this archetype. So very, very well said.
I think that's such a important point, is just letting go. And I think that's when the biggest things have always happened in my life, is when I've let go and said, well, I can't control this. Why am I trying to? Just let it happen. And like Fouad said, enjoy the process. I think even bringing it back to health and healing and changing your diet and all of these things that people stress out over, to say, well, you know what? I'm just going to let this happen day by day and eat this delicious, nourishing food and let my body heal slowly, and don't, I think, put a timeline on it, I have to get to this stage by this time, and, just let it happen and enjoy it.
Like, we don't want to let pizza be like the holy grail of healing. Like, a lot of people are going to adjourn their happiness until the time comes when they can eat pizza or something. You know what? So, all the while you're having like amazing grass-fed meats and butter and vegetables and broths and soups and, the most beautiful things. But you can be carrying a burden inside you waiting for pizza day, and I'm kind of simplifying what this whole thing is about, but there's so much abundance in our lives already to be able to consider something like gaps. Even what a gift in our life to be able to even think about it, to come across it. So this is the I guess those grooves that you talk about, Lauren, those mindsets that are like deeply grooved in our habits and our attitudes, and they form a self-image for us, because they're sort of like little rivets that go through our brain, and when the waters of life come washing over us, they're gonna take a certain shape, and the shape that they take is in those grooves that have already been formed in us. And we have to come to this point in understanding that we're not our thoughts, that our thoughts are just these patterns that we've acquired over time and that we default to when something happens. And who we are is, before thoughts started, we were who we are. The thoughts came after our fact of being. And that means that in allowing ourselves to be this greater being than the one that is just governed by thoughts, we can redefine ourselves. And I'm not one to sort of encourage people to have these positive mantras that say, yeah, I'm great, I'm all that kind of stuff. I don't think that's where it comes from. I think it comes from the realization that your thoughts don't actually define you, and that you have freedom in choosing what your thoughts are, and then reiterating the choices. So as the your emotions or thoughts react by default to a certain thing that happens in your life, like you get scared every time you see someone holding a knife because you watched a movie when you were a kid, or something traumatic happened. Then you can just say, well, this is not the reality that I'm going through, that these emotions that I'm feeling now are just emotions that I've always felt in this scenario, but they have they're not relevant to the present moment. So what is it that I can truly feel here, and do I have a choice in what I feel? And then that's when we start divorcing ourselves from the habituated thought patterns and can really reinvent ourselves. And that can only come from a person who's can accept that, hey, firstly, like, my thoughts are quite often destructive for me, and that I need to improve them, and I need to create a different being than who manifests himself in this world differently, because I just don't like who I am. I don't like the way that these things happen, and I know I'm greater than this. So you start focusing on these positive things. So can you give us some practical tips, I guess, for how you would go on this and change your mindset? Like, how do you do it? How do you change these old thought patterns that you have and create something new? What's your technique or strategy?
Well, I want to say that was a beautiful analogy where you said that our neuroplasticity or our brain pathways are like rivulets, and then the river of life comes in and it flows into basically our default setting. That was such a great analogy. So in order to change that default, what I have found most powerful in my own life is changing the fundamental relationship I have to my body. I think one of the ways that allows us to change our default thought patterns is getting in touch with that bigger being that's beyond thoughts that you touched on. And we do that through felt experiences. Like, we don't do that through thinking. We don't stand in front of a sunset that takes our breath away and think that's beautiful. We feel the beauty. So let's see. What I had to do is come to a place where I could trust my body to feel the truth for me, to feel the truth of that beautiful sunset, to feel the truth of a connection with another person, to feel the truth of following my intuition even when it felt scary. And I did that through kind of forging a new relationship with my body. I used to have a great distrust for my body. And I think anybody who has had a chronic disease can know this experience, because we worry that our body is going to turn on us any moment. And we feel like our body has betrayed us. Like, body, why are you tearing my life apart? Why are you making so many things I used to love inaccessible to me? And as a result, I lost trust in my body. I lost trust in my intuition. So the healing there was realizing my body always has the best intention for me, even when I don't realize it. that my body is actually smarter than my mind, and it's always taking care of me in a way that my mind can't. And if my body gets sick, it's because my body is telling me, hey, Lauren, I know what's best for you. And it's like, you need to get more sleep and slow down and not eat crap. And my mind is like, who are you to say that? Of course, I know better than you, body. Like, I can run my life better. So that is the Western mindset. We think our mind knows everything better than our body that is connected to the earth, that is in so many ways just beyond ourselves. So when I realized that and I surrendered, there's the word again, I surrendered to this trust that my body was always taking care of me. And if I listened to it, it was going to provide the best for me in the long run. Then I was able to change that thought pattern of, I hate being sick. This is a waste of my time, or I wish I didn't have these symptoms. And I was able to start blessing the experiences that my body brought to me. So what I say very often is chronic illness it's a sacred initiation into our strength, into the wisdom of our body, into the intelligence that's always with us. And it's a lifelong process, but if I could give an actionable step, it would be learn how to feel the truth in your body and start developing a trust with that. Just start telling your body, I trust you. I will do what you tell me to do because I know that you have my best interest at heart, even when I don't know how.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Lauren, because I agree with you. I think when we scan our inner world and we look at what our relationship with our body is, especially those of us who have gone through chronic illness, is we find that there's resentment and there's fear and there's pain and there's a me against the body kind of feeling going on. And it's not one that we're like, this thing is beating our heart every day and we're breathing for us and modulating our immune system and doing everything for us. And what we're carrying around emotionally for it all day is this resentment, which is quite debilitating for us on the healing journey. So that's beautifully said, and really, like, what a wonderful bit of advice for people is to relearn their relationship with their body and to start really getting rid of those emotions and to feel the love for themselves again. This is not in any way me saying, you have to love yourself, like in the way that people use it these days. It's that, the new agers, I guess, but mostly just to unearth what it is that you truly feel towards yourself and realize that you do have a choice there. You don't have to feel that kind of resentment, because if you dig even a little, like 1 inch down, you'll find that it is there, and it's a common thing for all of us. That's why we feel frustrated about ourselves and where we are, and we don't give our body the thanks and love that it deserves. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren.
Absolutely. There's one other thing I'll add to that is we have a product at Mio Energetics that's called Vagal Tone, and it's actually the vagal nerve, which is the nerve that connects our brain to all of our organs in the body, that literally carries messages of intuition from our gut and our heart. It carries our heart and gut messages up to our brain so that we can be more integrated with our intuition. And so you can look this up on Mio Energetics if you search intuition there. But that was a huge piece in support. If you need some support in trusting your body and feeling your body, I'd really recommend checking that out.
Awesome.
It just goes back all the time to, just traditional wisdom of listening to your gut and listening. I can't help laughing when I say that because we're talking about gut health a lot, but it's just, like you say, it's all joined. And I found, and Fouad has as well, that the more you get back to the way your body was designed to eat and it starts to heal, you can hear your body speaking to you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's the beauty of it. That's the trust.
Yeah.
I often say that there's just the one root cause of all sickness on this planet, and it's really a separation of the human being from his natural habitat and his home, and that manifests itself in societal diseases where we start polluting the water and the air, and we start spraying our foods with pesticides, and we start wanting profit over ethics and community, and then at the individual level we manifest sickness differently, and this world that we're born into creates a state of paranoia and distrust in ourselves and the people around us, and that in order for us to truly heal, we have to start healing from the inside, and then the society at large will start healing again, and then maybe our opinions and views can shift. And you've given us such beautiful practical advice that we can put in place today, and wanted to thank you for that. I'm sure our listeners would love this podcast, and would love to have you over again. Do you have any last words for our listeners before we head off?
No, I've so enjoyed the conversation, and I'd love to be back anytime. So thank you both so much.
Thank you so much. Can you just let everyone know where they can find you?
Absolutely. So Empowered Sustenance is where I share grain-free recipes and support for the healing journey. And also I have just a whole bunch of recipes on Pinterest if you look up Empowered Sustenance there, and Instagram and Facebook as well. And then the company with essential oils and flower essences that are going to help you rebuild new neuroplasticity. That's Mio, M-E-O, Energetics.com.
Okay, and we'll put the links to that in the show notes as well.
Awesome, thank you. And
I think you have a couple of ebooks as well. And do you have a recipe book, or what do you have?
2 ebooks. One is Quit Acne, the nutritional approach to clear skin, and the other one is Quit PMS, end your menstrual misery naturally.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll include links to all of those. Thank you so much, Lauren. It was absolutely amazing to hear you speak. It was beautiful.
Such a joy. I was so glad to connect with you both.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you all for listening. And please go and check out Lauren's website and her social media, Pinterest, recipes. She's just got so much to share. And I'm just so thankful that we could talk to you today. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.